Hey everybody, welcome back to Conscientious Omnivore. My name is Pal. Today I'm going to be doing another episode about February. Februdairy, sorry. It's such a silly name that sometimes I forget to say it right. So Februdairy, as I've talked about in some previous videos, is an attempt by the animal agriculture industry, specifically the dairy industry, to try and get consumers to buy more dairy products. They basically try to paint a false picture that dairy is good for you and that there are these, magical happy farms where all the cows get to, be on pastures and all this kind of stuff, and there's no, mass factory farming, and all the cows are happy except for the day that they get killed, but and when they get their babies stolen. But hey, that we need our milk. So anyway, so that's what they're trying to do. I've already talked about it a little bit in previous videos. If you haven't seen those, I definitely I recommend you checking them out. One of them talked specifically about the ethical side of things. The other one talked about the impacts to your health and consequences from consuming dairy. And then this one is going to be talking about the environmental impacts of consuming dairy. So I'm going to also be sharing with you a recipe for making another dairy product at home from plant sources, just like in the other videos. So I hope you enjoy that. That's coming up. Yeah, let's get into it. First thing I want to talk about is water consumption, because that's actually one of the things that most people probably are aware of when they're thinking about dairy. Cows need to drink a lot of water. But not only are we talking about the water that they drink, we're also talking about the water that is consumed when you look at the feed that is produced for them. So if you look, they're saying that a cow can drink 23 gallons of water. That's kind of a lot, but that's still like okay. But then if you look at how much water goes into cleaning the facilities that house the cows, you can actually see that for a dairy of 700 dairy cattle, you will use 104, almost 105,000 gallons of water every day. So that's just for cleaning the facilities. Then they talk about the water used for the feed. There's 6 pounds of alfalfa. It requires 683 gallons of water. A dairy cow can produce up to 7 gallons of milk a day. So that's quite a lot of milk. But if you add up the amount of water it takes to get the feed, and then you add up the water it takes to clean the facility and the amount that the cow drinks, you're looking at almost 5,000 gallons of water a day. That is like 700 gallons per gallon of milk that you get. So just think about that. You're literally taking 100 times as much. No, wait, what am I saying? No, sorry, 700 times as much. 700 times as much water to make the same amount of milk. So 1 gallon of milk, requires 700 gallons of water. That's an insane figure. Now, when they're multiplying it across the whole herd in this example, just to show what this kind of, I would call it probably a middle-sized dairy is consuming. But they're giving you this huge number, 3.4 million gallons of water every day. Now that number, I don't know if you're like me, but for me that number is so big that I can't even wrap my head around it. I can't imagine how much that is. It's too big to actually work with. That's why I think it's actually more kind of realistic if you think about it in gallons, because you're buying it in potentially gallons at the store. Just imagine that for that 1 gallon of milk that you pulled off the shelf, there's 700 gallons of water that went to produce it. So that's just an insane figure. And just as a as a comparison, it gives you a figure for making soy milk. It takes 9 gallons of water to produce the this is 1 glass of soy milk. So you probably have to multiply that up a couple times. But again, it's still a far cry from the 700 gallons for a gallon. So they give you some other estimates here for different things. A stick of butter is 109 gallons, a cup of yogurt 35 gallons. It's just an insane amount of water. They also talk in this article, I'll link this down in the description of the video. Definitely recommend checking it out. They talk about the greenhouse gas emissions from the cows. You can see that it's just a staggering figure. So here they're talking about methane, and they're basically making the point that, again, going back to this example dairy farm with 700 cows, they are releasing 325,000 pounds of methane. And to put it into perspective, they're saying a fracking well is responsible for the release of 30,000 pounds of methane a day. So we're talking almost 11 times the amount of methane produced by just this one dairy farm for the one fracking well. It's insane. And they're basically saying also that it's not just the methane, they're also producing nitrous oxide, which is, let's see, nitrous oxide has a global warming potential almost 300 times greater than carbon dioxide. So it's crazy. The methane itself is already 100 times worse than the carbon dioxide, and then the nitrous oxide is 300 times worse. So you just look at these figures and then you realize that it's an incredibly huge impact on the environment. I could go on and on. I think there's videos out there that have done a much more thorough job of kind of explaining the impact of the animal agriculture industry and dairy specifically. So I'm not going to get into super detailed nuances here, but they raise a great question here in this article saying, do you really need dairy? Obviously the answer is no, and I've already addressed that in my health consequences video. But here they're just putting into picture that if you're not consuming dairy for a year, you've already saved over 50,000 gallons of water. Now compare that to what most environmentalists and people will tell you. Get the low flow shower heads, take shorter showers, blah blah blah. Think of how many showers you would have to basically skip to save 50,000 gallons of water. Avoiding animal products is one of the easiest ways that you can have a huge impact on the environment. There's great movies that I would recommend checking out that really get into the nitty-gritty details of this. One of them is Cowspiracy, and the other things that you can watch are online. There's lots of great documentaries. I'm going to actually link a very short video by Bite Size Vegan. Emily has put together an amazing source of data, and everything's linked and cited and everything like that. So I think it's like a 15 minute video. It goes through all of the environmental impact of animal agriculture, and I definitely recommend checking that out. So I'll put a link to that at the end of this video, and I'll put it in the description. So I don't want to focus any more on that right now. But what I do want to say is that, somebody might counter this. Well, the only reason why this impact is so big is because we're doing these mass scale farms, and, the factory farms are destroying the planet. And if everybody went back to the way things were, back in the old days, we would be in this lovely, great world. And like I said, in the Februdairy campaign, what you are seeing is, if you go on Twitter, where this hashtag is being used, you are seeing the farmers promoting this image of the small-time farm, like back in the day, 60, 70 years ago, how all the dairy farms were. The cows are out in the pastures, and they're all, living these great lives, except that they don't show you the truth. And the other thing that's interesting is that hashtag was actually thought up by the dairy spokeswoman of the year, I think in last year, 2017, Dr. Jude Capper. And interestingly enough, I've seen a few people mention this, and I dug up the story myself. This was a study that Dr. Jude Capper did in 2009, so you can see her name right here, and they looked at the environmental impact of dairy production of today and compared it with that of yesteryear. So they compared 1944 to 2007, and they found some really interesting things. And here is the abstract of it. They're basically saying that comparatively, the modern factory farming methods are actually far more beneficial than the previous methods. So what you see here is that modern dairy practices require considerably fewer resources than dairying in 1944. They have only 21% of the animals, they have 23% of the feed, they have 35% of the water, and only 10% of the land required to produce the same amount of milk, which they're counting 1 billion kilograms of milk. And they've also reduced the waste outputs. So they're saying modern dairy systems producing 24% of the manure, 43% of the gases, 56% of this nitrous oxide, and then I think this is methane if I remember right. But anyway, so they're basically saying that the carbon footprint is lower. Yeah, it's saying 37% of the equivalent milk production from 1944. Now this is not some hippie vegan propaganda. This is industry-funded research by the person who's pushing the Februdairy. And what you see here is that the modern factory farming methods are actually lower environmental impact than what you saw from 70 years ago. And this is just mind blowing. I mean, you read through this thing. I'll link this as well, so if anybody wants to, you can go through it. But they get into really detailed explanations as to why this impact is lower. They talk about how you have the artificial insemination of the cows now, so you don't have to keep as many bulls around. You can freeze their semen, so you just don't need as many bulls. So you can cut down all the feed that you would need from in the olden days to be able to keep those the bulls alive. And they get into all the nitty-gritty details. So definitely check that out. I think it's really eye-opening. And I think just don't take my word for it. Take Dr. Capper's word for it. The Bovi Diva person pushing Februdairy. I don't think she's keen on sharing this on her Twitter posts, tweets, but it's really funny because when she launched the campaign, she said that the thing was that she wouldn't be blocking people because that would send the wrong message, that they want to be transparent and show how dairy is this wonderful thing. And I myself have been blocked by her, which is really funny, but I mean, so have pretty much any vegan that has commented or shared anything on her, on her posts or replied to any of her posts. Even though anybody who knows me, you'll know that I try to keep the language very civil, and I definitely don't use like swear words or cussing. And I was still blocked, just for simply pointing out certain things. So yeah, definitely check it out. Take a look at her Twitter posts, and maybe I'll put a link to that if you're ever bored, and just see how that stacks up to the information shown here. Okay, so yeah, I think just want to sum up some thoughts here and share with you another recipe for another delicious plant milk. We're going to make sesame milk, so check that out next. First step is you take your sesame seeds and you're going to soak them. Now I've seen many different recommendations for the water to seeds ratio. The one I'm going to use is about 1 to 6. So if you're going to do 1 cup of seeds, you're going to do 6 cups of water. Some people recommend as low as 4. I think that comes out a little bit too thick, so I would recommend at least like 5, but experiment with it and try what works best for you. For anybody who is not going to be using like cups or whatever to measure, I mean, you can just use whatever you want. You can measure it in mugs or whatever you got around the house. And just as reference, this is 200 grams of sesame seeds, so most of this bag is now empty. I think there's only like maybe this much, like a finger's width worth down at the bottom, and that's about 1 cup. So it's not rocket science. You can just dump the rest of this in there too. It's not going to change anything that much. So about 200 grams, just for reference. So I'm going to soak this for about an hour. All right, it's been soaking for actually well over an hour, probably closer to 2, which is fine. And I was going to mention also that this is kind of an optional step. If you don't have the time and you don't really want to, mess around with this, you can just blend the sesame seeds as they are with water. But anyway, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to strain these off. You want something with a really small, net, but basically, if you don't have that, you can either use like a tea strainer or pour it through like a kitchen cloth. So I'm going to strain these off, and then I'm going to put them in the blender and blend it up. Okay, so we've got the water and the sesame seeds. I've lightly rinsed them before putting them in here. I'm going to add just a little pinch of salt. You could also add something to sweeten, or vanilla, whatever you want. If you want to make chocolate, milk, you can add cocoa powder or whatever you want. But I'm just going to do a pinch of salt and keep it, more like a plain flavor. So let's get this blended up. Okay, so there's the lovely milk, and I kind of screwed up. I had a little bit too much water, so some of it poured out. I would say maybe stick with that 5 to 1 ratio, depending on the size of your blender. So anyway, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to strain this through the clean cloth and the sieve, and then we're going to put it into this big bowl, and then we are going to save the pulp that's left over, because I'm also going to be baking a bread right now, and I've got a series of videos showing you how to make your own sourdough starter and how to cook your own sourdough. So we are going to be cooking this up, and I'm going to use the pulp that's left over. So don't throw that away. Definitely use it for like baking. You can use it for muffins and breads and all sorts of good stuff. But let's get this drained, and I'll show you the next step. So there's all the lovely milk, and you can see the pulp in here. So we're going to add this to the bread, but let's get this poured into our milk jar. And you can see the heart on here, and the significance of this, I think, is that this milk, unlike dairy milk from animals, is actually not damaging to your heart from all the saturated fat and cholesterol. So yeah, just another thing to note. So there we go. We got a liter and a pint-ish from that. Tastes really good, really nice consistency, very creamy, definitely a rich plant milk as opposed to, say, like from rice. But the point of these videos that I'm trying to teach everybody is that you can really make tons of these plant milks at home. It's very easy, super simple, usually only takes a couple minutes. Yeah, I think you just end up with a healthy, product that tastes great. You can make it at home for really cheap. Sesame seeds are really cheap. I think just give it a shot and let me know how it turns out for you. I think you'll like it. One thing that I just want to note real quick is that the soaking time for me with the sesame seeds in particular is always a little bit tricky. Sometimes you end up with this little like bitter aftertaste. It's not so bad that it's like gonna make you not want to drink it, but just it's noticeable there. It's got this little kind of like bitterness, like planty kind of taste at the end. And I think it has to do with the soaking, but I'm really not sure, and I haven't been able to come to like an answer on it yet. But I think just sometimes if you maybe if you're soaking it too much, or if it's not soaked enough, I really don't know. You end up with this kind of like bitter aftertaste. You can also mess around with just no soaking at all, and maybe that's what I'll do next time. But anyway, just thought I'd mention that just to be upfront with you guys. So experiment, try it out yourself, and I think you're gonna like it. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that. All right, so final thoughts. Basically, my point is look into the research. What you will find is that there are serious health consequences to consuming dairy. It's really terrible for you. You definitely don't need it. Anything that you get from it that's good, like calcium or protein, can easily be, obtained from plant sources. And basically, there are many really solid ethical reasons against consuming dairy, which I've also covered. And there are really great environmental reasons to not consume it either. So, I think I've tried to show you just some of the, plant sources that you can make at home. They're cheap, they're easy to do. You can buy them in the store. It's literally the difference between choosing this item from this part of the shelf and that item from the other part of the shelf. I've got a little, late night snack here. I got some tofu and some bread that I made with the leftover sesame seeds from the pulp, I should say, from the milk, and a little, couple of tomatoes. Really easy to get anything you want nowadays in a plant variety, in a vegan version. So that's what I want to leave you with. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, remember to give it a big thumbs up. I hope to see you in the next one. And thanks a lot for everybody's support. I've been, really excited. The channel's growing like crazy, and I couldn't be happier. So I'll keep sharing, these with you, and hope to see you in the next one.